Uh, anyhow, my name's Jeff Waring, which I introduced myself to you already. My students call me Dr. Jeff. So I am a professor at Black Hills State University. So that's my career right now. And so a little about me, I know very little about the ag industry, okay? I'm actually learning quite a bit because I get a lot of students who, that's their background, coming from ranching primarily. And so I'm learning a ton. I've been here for almost 5 years. And it seems like most of the students who are on the rodeo team that I have also have, family in ranching. So that's mainly where I've been learning about the industry. I teach mainly entrepreneurship courses, right? So I came into this preparing for this presentation thinking, what do I know about this industry? And I'm like, oh my goodness, like human resources, I know how to talk about human resources, but this is such a different industry, okay? And there was a sign outside there that you probably saw, right? It says, our ag industry has a unique set of requirements and work style. Every ranch has a unique identity, right? This unique set of requirements for people, for hiring within the industry. And I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, and it was kind of freaking me out. And then I realized, my background. So I came from manufacturing. So my family, my grandfather had started a precast concrete manufacturing firm. And so that was my background, as I grew up working in this manufacturing company. And I remember when I was 16, or 18, somewhere in that range, and my dad sat down with me and said, the biggest problem we face right now is there's not enough farm kids. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, what does that mean? There's not enough farm kids, because we're not on a farm, we're in a manufacturing plant. And so I kept thinking about it, not enough farm kids. And really it's this work ethic and this mentality of getting up, getting it done, being more independent maybe than someone who's going to be working at McDonald's, right? So that's what he was looking for, is he classified as farm kids. And so as I thought about that, I'm like, well, it's probably the same type of thing you're looking for on the ranch, right? You're looking for that attitude and that independence. So it's really not that different. So that's where I really started to say, okay, well, maybe we can actually help, right? So maybe I can actually help employers who, even though it's a different industry, it's not manufacturing, it's not like a Fortune 500 company, it's it's more of a family business, right? And a lot of those concepts I dealt with growing up and working in a family business, in my previous career, will actually apply. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Okay, my academic background. So I actually started out as an engineer, and then I got my MBA with a joint major, so double major in human resources and strategic management. So I take a very strategic view of HR. Okay, and so how can HR be give you a sustainable competitive advantage in your company? Okay? And so that's where I come from. And then ultimately I got my PhD in organizational behavior. So as we go on, you'll see I go more into the theories of motivation and job satisfaction and how that is going to affect you when you're hiring. Okay? So just so you kind of see how it flows, I'm not a huge fan of HR from a paperwork, filling out documents standpoint. It's more about how do you find the people that are right for your needs. So from a strategic standpoint, if we have any resource, right, and we want it to be strategic for our company, it has to meet 4 criteria. So Jay Barney from Ohio State kind of pushed these through. It has to be valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized. Okay, so it has to have some value. And so you look at it yourself, if you're looking for a job working on a ranch, are you valuable? Do you provide value to the ranch? Okay? And hopefully yes. And hopefully you can define that in a job interview. Are you rare? So is your skill set something that not everybody has? And so from our conversation, it sounds like this idea of dealing with multiple animals on the same land might be a rarer skill that not everybody would necessarily have. Okay? Is it inimitable? So difficult for somebody to copy. If you have this rare skill set, but anybody can pick up a textbook and learn it in a week, well, then it's not that valuable. Right? And so as an employer, you're looking for people who have a rare skill that can't be copied easily. And then organized, do you know how to put it to work in a fashion that's actually going to bring that value to the organization? So that's how, from a strategic standpoint, how you would look at human resources, is having these 4 criteria. Okay. Any question? And since it's just a couple of us, I don't want to just keep. Okay. So my perspective on human resources, I call it Kara, and I was talking to my aunt. She's an HR professional, and she said you cannot put that picture in there. But I just want to point out, I'm not talking Kara like a 24-year-old British model. I'm talking about crafting, attraction, retention, and attrition. So that's how I view human resources. Okay, it's about crafting the job, attracting the right employees, retaining those employees, and then managing as they leave the organization. Okay, and then I usually call her Kara P because there's a lot of paperwork that's involved. Okay, and that's changing constantly. A ton of that is now online, but it's really important to keep track of what the laws are. Okay, I'm not going to go into the paperwork very much, so I'll focus on the people issues. And I think these are just as important when you're looking for a job as when you're hiring. Okay, so crafting, understanding what is the job that needs done. Okay, so focus on the outcome and the skills necessary. So I think oftentimes people think this is exactly what I want done, and they want to almost micromanage and say, I want somebody who can do this, do this, do this, do this. When really, it's better if you can say, I want someone who can get this accomplished. Have a big task and say, who has all of the skills necessary to accomplish this task. Right? And if you craft the job in that fashion, I think you'll be able to find better employees who will maybe be more versatile in the long run. And I think it's good for you to understand what you're looking for when you're looking for the job. Okay? Then you want to attract them. And so it's important to know, okay, can you understand the demand? So how many people are needed for your position, right? As well as the supply of labor. Okay, so what is the demand? I don't know, how many individuals do you say a typical ranch needs per 100 head of cattle?
That's not an answerable question.
Okay.
The reason being, and I'll narrow it down here, but there's so many factors. Can you run 1,000 head on 600 acres? Well, one or two guys, maybe.
Okay.
But he said per 100 head. So, but if you run 1,000 head, what they say, 1,000 head on 600 acres. But if you're running that 1,000 head out on the desert, you might have to cover 250,000 acres. Now you're needing at least a half dozen guys.
Okay.
So that's the whole thing with this, on this ag side, it doesn't fit into the, like you were talking about, it's completely different. There's so many wide variances from ranch to ranch because of what their structure is, sometimes dictated by the environment, natural resources, sometimes dictated by the direction that the owner wants to go. They're just, and then you're dealing with the people you hire. Back to your example, the concrete plant. It's not just work ethic, but most people that are working farms or ranches, they're welders, they're carpenters, they're equipment operators, they're animal handlers, they're horse trainers, mechanics. They've done pretty much everything there is to do.
Yeah, the skills are all is a broad set of skills.
And where you, depending on where your position is, now you're an office manager and a finance person, as well as you have those other skills down there too, veterinary stuff, animal husbandry, plant.
Soil and plant health, soil science.
So it's a unique deal where you go back to your concrete thing. Most of those guys had one or two skill sets in there, didn't they?
Yeah, so most of them did. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I went to visit one plant, and the owner specifically told me that he has to have all the different skills to be able to effectively manage. That was his perspective, right? But he didn't view all of his employees as needing all of those skills. So really in his mind at this plant was he had to have all the experience, but not everybody else did. And you're kind of saying on the ranch you really want to have, a broad range of experiences for all your employees.
You really want to have people who can step in and fill a place when someone else is gone, or you need an extra hand, to help out with working cows or moving cows or calving.
You can't have a part-time mechanic, a part-time welder, and a part-time fence fixer, and a part-time bookkeeper, and a part-time need one or two people that,
Can
Can
do it all.
do it, yeah.
so it's a unique world.
Yeah.
There are some big outfits though that you have a manager, you know, over the whole thing. But then you do have some that are a cow boss or the farming boss.
And if
And
they're big enough, they have a mechanic. And
yeah,
Yeah.
and so there are places that do have people that, you know, that are key to specific areas on the ranch.
But I'll bet that's 1% of the
Okay.
ranches or farms.
They have to be pretty big to be able to justify
Yeah.
that.
That seems to get into more of the big corporate farms or ranches that have some of that. Or you have big investment finance people who are buying a ranch. And then they're just, you know, they have business and investments elsewhere, so they just hire people, you know, to run the place.
Yeah.
So absence
And
of
it's
owner.
big enough to justify it.
Yeah. So the point being, you need to understand that if you're running the ranch, you need to understand, okay, what types of individuals do I need and how many of them, and you know, being very deliberate about that. And something you want to avoid is saying, oh, I need these skills, when it's really, well, this employee doesn't really need, right? If he's not a welder, I have other guys that can weld, and so you might be setting the bar too high for, you know, this particular hire, and so just being very deliberate with that. Okay. Next, I want to mention attracting employees and selecting employees. So, thinking about, okay, where are you going to find these employees that you need? How are you going to communicate with them? And how will you determine if they're going to fit? Okay. And I like to look at this as, you know, where are you fishing, right, to try and find these employees? And, you know, one thing people talk about now is looking online, right? I assume, have you looked for jobs online? I would assume a lot, right? And it's kind of hard because there's so many different job sites online right now. And, so, you know, some are national, some are local. We have one that's just for, you know, campus, right? So students who want to, or employers who want to hire students from Black Hills State, right? So you have all of these different sites, which makes it kind of difficult. But that's...
That all ads sound the same after you read the third one.
Yeah.
It's be hard to sort through.
Yeah. Well, and then that's the thing, yeah, and then you look at them, you have to create, you know, okay, how are you going to write up this job to make sure that it actually fits with the type of employee I'm looking for, right? So this comes to this idea of, you know, do you want to describe, I don't even know what grazing technician would be, right? But you see it, you know, versus ranch hand, versus a caver, versus whatever other positions they want, and then you have to say, oh, well, what are the skills, right? And getting that out there. What I've found, at least with my students, a lot of it's in the communication. You know, they talk, you know, informally, and my students get their jobs by, it's like so-and-so's neighbor knew of somebody that had a position open. And that's more if it's a local search, right? It blows my mind, but so many of my students want to stay in South Dakota. And they're like, I'm gonna, you know, my career is gonna be working on a ranch in South Dakota. It's like, okay. And so they find them informally like that. But where can you look if you're searching broader, or if you're trying to hire it broader, right? I think the associations like this are great. I was actually kind of surprised. I went through the magazine that they put out, and I didn't see job listings in there, and that surprised me. I might have just missed the page.
In fence post?
Is that what it's called?
It is
The
oh,
Tri-State Livestock News. Is there another one
yeah.
that would have it?
Yeah, fence post, it's more of a Colorado, but they're all kind of together, and they do have job listings in the fence post. I don't think Tri-State does.
I honestly can't remember. I know
So-
that I thought they had.
I would think they would. I flipped through and I didn't see them, so maybe they just need to make them a little more, you know, prominent.
The Fence Post is more of a magazine
Okay.
publication. I think they have one out here on the table too.
Okay.
I know it does have.
Yeah.
I
job
think
listings.
Tri-State does as well, but I don't remember it. I've been through so many papers in the last few months.
Yeah. And so, you know, looking for those sources, since you're willing to move, I think, you know, looking at those type of sources might be good, especially for managerial type position. I don't think, you know, word of mouth isn't going to be as beneficial because you're not going to have that many positions on large ranches right here, right, where you know the neighbors, so you might have to look more broadly. So anyhow, but a lot of people are communicating just, you know, informally through who they know, and so that's good. Actually, I bet this, you know, this event here is probably a good place to just talk to people and find out what they hear of. So, okay, selecting employees. Okay, up here, this is all the criteria that are typically used when selecting employees, okay? So you have your application, your resumes, your interviews, your reference checks, background checks, personality tests, drug testing, cognitive ability tests, performance tests, and integrity tests, okay? So when you're looking broadly at how people hire, these are the types of things they're looking for. When you're applying for a job on the ranch, what's the most common thing you're gonna have to talk about or have to do?
What you know, what you done.
Right? Yeah, so, oh, I passed it. What was it? So interviews probably, right? So when you actually talk to them, and we talk about interviews, there's situational interviews, which is kind of what you know. So it's, you give somebody a hypothetical situation, say, hey, this is what happened, how would you deal with it, right? And do they know how to deal with that situation? Or the behavioral interviews where it's, describe to me what you've done in the past. And so from what I've been able to find out, that seems to be the most important criteria in this industry, right? Is those actual interviews of this, like you said, what do you know, what have you done?
And they wanna know, what is it you're looking for, what position you're looking for, and what are your experiences?
Yeah.
What do you have to bring to the table if I hired you?
Yeah, which it's interesting to me because that's very common for was it like white collar jobs typically you would think about that, or higher level positions in companies. But usually when I'm used to the blue collar type positions where you're getting your hands dirty, the experience is like, oh, you graduated from high school, here, we'll teach you stuff, right? But in ranching, they expect you to come in with all of this expertise, and it amazes me, they know it.
Most of those blue collar, there's always somebody around who knows and keep an eye on the new guy.
Yeah.
Where a lot of your farm and ranch stuff, you are needed to know what you're doing and get set to go do it.
Yeah. And fortunately, a lot of even guys coming out of high school seem to have a lot of that experience because they've grown up with it. And so, it does work. Whereas not many kids, come out of high school having had any experience in manufacturing. Somehow they've come out. I had one student, he's like graduating college with like 12 years of ranching experience. And I'm doing the math, I'm like, that means you were like 8, It's
And
like,
it starts, the same thing can apply, I'll just say a mechanic. You grow up and your father's a mechanic, has a mechanic shop.
Yep.
And you've helped them since the time you were little. Then to go into that, say if you go through a few years of college or whatever, and you get out of there, you have a lot of experience to either start your own or work for someone else or a big company
Yeah.
doing mechanic or diesel mechanics. You already have a lot of background in that, and it's not hard for you to start off in something like that at a pretty young age.
yeah. No, you're right. That's a great analogy. So, so generally speaking, come join us.
I was just peeking in to see what was going on.
Okay. Generally speaking, the most commonly used things for hiring people are criminal records checks and employment verification. Those are the two highest, and drug tests. So I don't know if they're actually done when you're applying for jobs on the ranches, but those are the most commonly, selection criteria, which is really interesting, right? Everybody seems to want to do the background check and make sure you're not lying to them and you're not, doing drugs.
And most of what I've seen, it would be education / or maybe I should say, experience, knowledge / education would be number 1, followed by references number 2.
And
The rest of them are usually, well, in your reference and employment verification go 1 and 7. And then usually the rest of them don't exist. Sometimes drug check, sometimes not, but most times not.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's usually pretty much the end on the exit.
Yeah. Something I always want to point out is whatever you're doing, if there's a couple things you want to pay attention to, is it a reliable measure, right? So is it going to be consistent if you were to test a person over time, right? Are they going to have the same results? So you may say, oh, I'm going to give like a math test to them, right? Is it actually going to be given in a way that it actually measures over time the same thing, right? Or if they're having a bad day, will it give a poor result? And then validity, how much does it actually predict job performance? So is this a valid measure of how well they'll do at the job? And so can you consider that? And if it's not, if it's either not a reliable test or it's not a valid test, has nothing to do with the job, or I like to say if it's not relevant to the job, you're really just lining yourself up for some kind of legal battle. Okay, most tests that people will give when they're hiring have been shown to have some kind of bias based often upon race or something, or the culture that someone comes from, and that's like a legal nightmare. So I say, if it's not relevant directly to the job, don't do it. Okay, and so just be aware of that when you're hiring. Okay, so any questions on any of that? No? Okay. So you've crafted the job, you've attracted your employees, you've selected ones that you think fit. You also want to fit culturally. I didn't mention that. There's going to be a certain culture that's different ranch to ranch, and hopefully by talking to the individual, you can figure out if there's a culture fit as you're applying for jobs. Obviously, that's one of the main things you're looking for is will you fit the culture? And if not, then I wouldn't take the job because otherwise it's not going to last. Okay. Next, what makes an employee stay? Any thought what the number one thing to make an employee stay is?
We've talked about this a lot.
Okay.
On the ranching side of things, both from the employer and employee side.
Number one. What would you already have an idea or?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna flip to the next slide.
Okay. Number one, how they're treated.
Okay, so how they're treated, right? And so it is a broad umbrella. It's job satisfaction, right? And how they're treated is a big component of whether they're going to be satisfied with the job.
Yeah, I was breaking job satisfaction down for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the twofold there. You like what you're doing, and that plays a factor into it.
Mhm.
Because as you said, every ranch is different. There's a lot of diversity in how it's run.
Styles.
And styles. So it depends on whether you fit into that style and if you enjoy how they're doing it. And that brings satisfaction. And then I think the respect coming from the employee and employer side. But what helps a person to stay is that respect and communication.
Yeah.
Where you feel you're valued from both sides. You feel like you're valued and you're putting into this together. It's teamwork.
So what's interesting, right? From the employee side, that makes complete sense, right? That's like so logical. From an employer side, they often miss it. And so,
They do.
yeah,
They miss it most of the time.
and so they start to think, oh, what do we do? Well, we should throw more money at them, or we should and it's like, well, that's not really hitting what the issue is, right?
Yeah.
And so when you look at the research on job satisfaction, there's a whole bunch of things that go into whether somebody's satisfied with their job, right? There's the pay, there's opportunities for promotion, how they like dealing with their supervisor, with their coworkers, how they like what they're doing, right? Whether they get a sense that they're doing some good for society, whether they feel like, hey, this is a position of prestige, right, and status, or if they feel like it's a safe environment, right? These all go into whether somebody's satisfied with their job, right? And you already mentioned what you think is the most important ones, right? You said how they're treated by their supervisor.
I think on the ag side, most people would go, how you're treated, how you're paid, and what kind of environment.
Okay.
More on our environment, more on the, I should say, moral, social side of just respect, communication.
Well, I'd say the environment tags back to the first one real times.
Okay.
How you're treated.
Yeah. So the idea of
Are you given junk to work with and expected to make it a silk purse? That's part of the treatment and environment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I think
interesting.
for most agriculture, because those people are, whether you're an employer or employee, they're a simple-minded bunch of people. And most of them, on both sides, you look at that list and think, whatever, doesn't apply.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is the same things I think will apply, like what you mentioned. If you look at the research, like across industries, it's the same thing. So how you're treated by your supervisor, how you enjoy your coworkers, and how you enjoy what you're doing are the top ones across industries, right? Much more than pay is, or even opportunities for
You only
promotion.
be compensated, but it doesn't matter how much you're getting paid if your work environment
Yeah.
is not meshing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Pay
Well-
doesn't compensate for that.
And I think it's funny because this seems more intuitive now than it did 10 years ago. I think 10 years ago, everybody would have been like harping, it's pay. And now I think it's, especially with dealing with millennials, people people are realizing, well, maybe pay's not the most important thing. You know, maybe these other factors are. So,
I'm wondering, coming from the ag side, if pay has always not been number one.
yeah.
Dealing with that, you know, that's my experience, I'm gonna say, from life, is that it's always been about the people.
Yeah.
It's always been about having the good work
Well, because
environment.
ag is really a lifestyle.
Well, it shocks me when I calculate. My students tell me like how many hours they work, on the ranch, and I'm thinking, you're not getting paid anything. Like if you really broke it down, it's.
But it goes back to
But it's
that,
the life.
that old saying, if you enjoy what you're doing, you'll never work another day in your life.
Yep.
And it's a whole different lifestyle and gratification where if you're in the right situation, you're getting to watch those calves or that hay or that wheat or whatever grow up and do something. You get to see gratification all the way through.
That goes back to
And
that
so you
value.
enjoy a lot of stuff all the time. Plus, you know, if you were working those hours in the factory, you'd rather shoot yourself.
Yeah.
But you're doing all sorts of different things all the time. You rarely get sick of the job.
Yeah.
Because about the time you're just about fed up with it, it's done, it's time to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where those long hours come in and you don't really.
So it's that work. You enjoy the work, and so it doesn't matter as much to you, right?
It's the only reason you're in there.
I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. I don't know if you've ever heard of his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And you know, people harp on saying, "Oh, you have to work more than 4 hours." And his point is, you should only spend 4 hours a week doing stuff you hate. And so you should put that as your ceiling: 4 hours a week of stuff you hate, and that's your work. And then you do other stuff that you enjoy the rest of the time. And you know, I think that's probably a good basis. If you can aim for that, that's a good goal. So, the work itself was the most important thing, right? And so I like to talk to employers and say, okay, what does that really mean? You know, from an employee standpoint, when they say, oh, I enjoy my work, what do they mean by that? And so the research has shown, well, it's the variety. So they want to be doing lots of different things. You know, it's being able to identify with their job, right? To say, hey, I'm a rancher, right? I mean, that means something, right? You like to identify with the job, and that you feel it's significant, okay? Is this something that has some kind of meaning in life? Okay? So those are all really important, okay? Also the autonomy, so being able to, like you mentioned, to not be micromanaged. And so, you know, they'll enjoy what they're doing more if they have the ability to go and say, okay, this is how I feel it should be done. And, you know, focus on outcomes instead of like this, okay? And then feedback. And not like end of year evaluations, but the continual feedback of, you know, that was good, or even, hey, you could do it better, here's some suggestions, right? But just constant communication throughout the year of what could be done better and what has been done good, okay? And so those are the factors that actually lead to an employee liking the work.
Well, on that last one, there's nothing worse than you thinking everything's fine until you get called in for the meeting.
Yeah.
And you really have no clue where they're coming from because they've presented a whole other philosophy for the last however long.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're just getting no feedback, and then it's like the end of the year, and it's like, okay, it's December, we have to call you in and tell you how you did, and it's like, well,
Actually, I just got
it's too late.
done with one that they actually gave me positive feedback until they called me in.
Wow.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Where'd this come from?
Yep. Well, and that, yeah.
Then I was able to look back and see what they did wrong.
Yeah. Well, and in some states, that can be a legal issue. If they've been giving positive feedback and then they give negative feedback at the end of the year, it can be a legal problem. And so, you know, in South Dakota, that's not an issue because we can do whatever in South Dakota. But just be aware of that, you know, with what the state laws are. It might be important to, as you go along, if you have a problem employee, to keep documenting, hey, I've given them continual feedback to try and, you know, help him improve or at least recognize what he's doing wrong. So, but you easily recognize that those are all going to be factors that are going to affect it, you know, whether an employee likes their work and whether they're satisfied with their job. But some employers just don't even think about it. Like the idea of autonomy, they might think, oh, this employee wants to know exactly what I want, so I have to keep telling him, and it's probably not what they want.
Well, in ag, you end up with a lot of employers who have never, ever been an employee. At best, they work for their dad when they're young.
Yeah.
So they're totally disconnected from the reality of that interaction.
Yeah. Well,
There's
that's
a lot of things that an employee would deal with on a totally different financial level, living level than a ranch owner. They have no concept of the employee's needs. And so they look at the employee's needs, and when the employee says, you know, I need this and this and this and this, and say they have a family of 3 kids, and an employer can't fathom how much money the ranch employee needs to function and make things work.
yeah.
And there's a whole lot more details and factors that go into it.
You know, make it quick, you know, the employee is buying his own fuel. The employer is taking out the company tank.
Yeah.
Same tires, same oil changes, lots of times with vehicles.
Yeah.
The ranch is, yeah, so.
There's a lot of expenses employers don't see on the personal side because the ranch writes it off.
Right.
Where a ranch employee, they can't write that off because they're just getting a W-2 at the end of the year. And every new tire, vehicle part, insurance, a lot of times for ranches that don't offer that, every expense they're raising the family is all out of their personal budget that they're making on their monthly salary.
Yeah.
There's nothing to write off or hide, you know, as a ranch expense. Like a ranch owner can. So if a ranch owner says, well, we only spent $1,500, you know, in our personal budget last month. It's like, what did you spend that on, and what did you cover and write off as a ranch expense?
Yeah.
And and that's just one aspect. There's so many other things.
Well, and it's interesting because in a lot of the ranches I've talked with people from, they have 2 types of employees, right? You've got the employees that are hired, and then you have the family members who, you know, get a lot of those benefits. And to differentiate, like, you know, maybe it's okay for a family member only to be making $5 an hour because they have all these other side benefits, but you can't be doing that with, you know, an employee who's on their own, and who also doesn't have the long-term benefit, right? So, you know, a son who's going to take over the ranch someday, you know, in my mind, he can work for $5 an hour because someday he's going to get this kind of big payout, right, of being able to take over the ranch.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, most employees don't have that opportunity. I didn't actually think about this until a couple years ago. I was sitting down with one of our employees. So my family has the manufacturing business and the hardware store. And there was this one employee that had been at the hardware store for about 20 years. And, you know, he had worked his way up. It's a large hardware store, like a Lowe's type. And he said to me, he said, you know, you don't understand that I have a ceiling. And, you know, and he was like our star employee, and he was like, I have a ceiling. I will never own this store. You know, whereas you and your brother have the opportunity to someday own the store. And, you know, that was so, like, impactful to him that even though he was making more than my brother at the time, he knew that my brother would own the store. And so that, you know, he felt like he was being kind of underpaid because he wasn't getting that opportunity. Anyhow, it was something I hadn't even struck me.
Yeah. And you deal with the same thing on the ranching and farming side.
Yeah.
So,
So I actually think this is going to be even a bigger issue when you're talking with millennials. So these younger generation that's coming up, it's been shown that, you know, millennials are really looking for growth opportunities. And so you're saying, okay, how do I give them these growth opportunities when I know that there's a ceiling for them, right? And so, you know, what am I going to be able to do? I would assume ranches often have the same people there for decades sometimes. Is that?
Some do, some
Yeah.
don't.
some do. Ranching actually has a high turnover.
Okay.
The ranching industry does.
Yeah.
High turnover employee rate.
Yeah, I would assume it's probably similar to like our manufacturing plant where a lot of employees would only be there 2 or 3 years, and then some of them would stay like 30, right? And, you know, there weren't many that stayed 10 to 15. It was like either short term or long term is kind of how we had it. And that's how I at least perceive the ranching to be similar.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what do you do with these, you know, younger employees where they're flipping jobs all the time, right? But they want to have this growth, okay? So here's my analogy, right? Hats. It seems like everybody on the ranch wears a hat. right? So you actually form your hat, right? And I haven't. I took mine to a place to get it formed because whatever. But some people will actually form their own hats, right? And so you have a fur felt hat, right? And there's one process for forming that hat and shaping it, right? And then, but if you have a straw hat, right, you're going to use a different process for shaping that hat. And so I think the same thing applies to the employees. Is really you have to just sit down with them and say, okay, what are you looking for? And that open communication. Are you looking for something that, hey, this is just something for you to make a living? You're newlywed. You want to pay for starting off your life together while you build up your own your own herd on your family ranch. Or is this something you're looking for as a long-term career, and how can we develop you, and can you learn how to weld if you don't already know how, and what are you going to do? And that really has to be an individual by individual type of process. And so it seems intuitive, but some employers forget that these are people they're talking to, and every person has a different path of where they see themselves in 5 or 10 years.
Well, and from the employee's viewpoint, most of them love the opportunity to learn something.
Yeah.
From the employer's viewpoint, how much am I going to spend teaching them so they can go benefit somebody else?
Oh. And if you talk to them and find out what their goals are, maybe you can rectify that and say, oh, well, if you're going to be here in 5 years, it's worth teaching you this new skill. Right? And so, but growth, as you said, growth is what a lot of employees are looking for. So, it seems dumb. Yes, talk to your employee. Talk to them like they're a human being.
Yeah.
Duh. Okay. Lastly, attrition, right? So employees are going to leave, and there's lots of reasons they leave, right? So what are some of the reasons an employee might end up leaving?
Family change.
Okay. So something happens in their life where they want to move and do something different. Okay.
Go back home.
Right?
If you do that.
Yeah. Good. What else?
Sometimes on the ag side, it's the climate. They took a job somewhere, but they just don't like the wind and snow.
Oh, okay.
Or they just don't like the humidity,
Yeah.
or don't like the constant rain. Wish they'd get some rain so something would grow. So there are a lot of ag people that move on because they just decided they didn't like that type of weather climate. But then you get it down into how they're treated and how they're paid.
Yeah.
Gets to be the next thing. I mean, probably the most common, but those others are pretty common too.
So this is what I think is interesting, right? Because I do this for students in my classes, and we spend probably a half an hour talking about terminating employees and doing layoffs and all of these things. And it doesn't seem like that's really the big reason, right? That people end up leaving employment in the ag industry, right? It's usually by choice. And so I think that's great, right? And it's a good industry in that way. But even when it's by choice, there's some things you have to consider in terms of why did they leave, right? So I often talk about, if you're terminating an employee, are you terminating them because they're incompetent, or are you terminating them because you didn't give them the right training to be successful? And I would say there's probably incidents where you could have trained somebody and then they wouldn't have wanted to leave because they're getting the growth they're looking for, or maybe they can now do the skills, and then people hate to have jobs where they feel like they can't be successful, right? So maybe if you train them in something that they're not feeling successful in, now you can keep them, right? And just that idea of, okay, before you lose an employee, think about the training aspect. And the main reason is it's really expensive to hire somebody, right? It costs a lot of money to hire somebody. And, sending them off for a week to a welding class might be a whole lot cheaper than hiring somebody else. And so just understanding, again, talking to them and understanding, if you're thinking of leaving, what is the reason, and is there some training we could do that could be beyond it, okay? And then the other thing is, when they leave, when an employee leaves, what's going to happen to everybody else, right? They're not going to be the only one working on the ranch. And so there's this idea of survivor syndrome. It's really a big deal in manufacturing, and if you're doing layoffs, right? So imagine you have 50 employees and you have to lay off 10 of them, okay? what happens to the other 40? They're all shaking in their boots, wondering if they're next. Okay, and so that's a big deal where it increases stress, decreases productivity. I think you can have the same problem even if they leave by their own volition, because now everybody else is like, well, am I going to get their workload, right? So what's going to happen to me now that this individual left? And so just paying attention, okay, how does the leaving employee affect everybody else? Does that make sense? Just something to be very deliberate about, and it'll be okay. You can hire and train somebody else. Cool. So that's it. That was, I don't know if you guys had anything else you wanted to talk about. That was the things I wanted to cover. And mainly because I was expecting to talk to a room full of employers who don't have the ability, like, they don't have the habit of thinking like an employee. And so I just wanted to point out, hey, this is what employees are thinking.
Well, I'll put it this way. They have one of these down in Greeley, Colorado.
Okay.
We were down there and we sat in on both seminars. And walked away down there, maybe knew you guys were completely out of touch. And they were. I think you did really good. As you said, you don't have a whole lot of ag background, but you have, you paid attention, everybody's around you doing stuff all the way through, and when you put it together, you actually hit pretty close to ag reality.
Yeah. Well, what surprised me is it's really ultimately not that different, right? It's just maybe an extreme case where the employees want autonomy more than in a normal, position that I'm used to, but it's still autonomy, right? They still want, to love the work. They still want to, find, a good relationship with their supervisor. And so it's the same things. It just might be an extreme case compared to what you would see in manufacturing or working at McDonald's or something. I don't know. I think it's a cool industry. I still have trouble when I talk to my students. They're so passionate about it, and it's like, oh my goodness, if I could find a job where I could be that passionate about what I'm doing, like.
It's like he was talking about, ranching, farming is a lifestyle. It's
Yeah.
something you choose to do because you love it. And it really works well for everybody, managers, employers, just ranch hands. If you can work together and it feels like a family unit. And that comes in with being able to be humble. For each individual to be humble enough to say, I don't always do it right, I can learn more. My employee may have a better idea of how to get something done than I do. Just because, my family's done this for 75, 100 years doesn't mean we have it all figured out. And just being able to have that open mind to listen to one another, whether it's the employer listening to the employee or the employee listening to the employer. There needs to be mutual respect there amongst everyone, and helping each other out, serving each other for the common goal, and that's what makes it work.
Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing that the idea of serving each other, it seems to even go beyond the ranch. I see, my students talk about how somebody else is like branding, and they all get together from nearby. And I'm like, so you're just going to help another company do their work for a couple days, like.
Well, I'll expand on that. A lot of that's trading, then they'll come over and help you.
Yeah.
But in the whole ag industry, when you just got hurt and broke your leg, everybody's gonna come over and get your hay put up, get your cattle cramped. You're gonna sit in the chair and watch. And nobody really expects anything out of it.
Yeah.
It's a whole different mentality of people.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like. Yeah, it says something incredible about the industry that just happens like organically, like boom, there it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and when you got a good rapport and relationship with your neighbors amongst the farms and ranches, it just makes it all that much better. When you're a good neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for coming for this.
Thank you did a good job.
So.
Well, better than what we had last week.
Well, I think the ones who spoke last week were good. They presented their information well.
Yeah.
Very
but-
out of touch.
But very out of touch with the ag industry.
Okay.
So, but other than that, they did well, and we gleaned because we think you can learn from any situation. So they did well in what they presented, but they didn't really have probably any knowledge in the ag industry.
Yeah. Cool. So there's my business cards, just in case you guys want them, or if you think of anything or want, for some reason, want the slides, or I don't know.
Thank you.
It's a habit.
Thought maybe email a copy of your